On behalf of the Professional Baseball Strength and Conditioning Coaches Society, I'd like to welcome you to the PBSCCS Podcast. I'm your host, Chris Messina.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with that one. Actually, I really like both of those, and you're kind of the first person to bring up like that movement literacy, but then also taking the lens of like, the overseer and how you hire and what you look for. And I've always told like interns or coaches that are underneath me is like just be a good person first, and we'll teach you the skills that you need. But if you're really skilled and you're just a shitty person, it's really hard to change that. And so it's refreshing to hear that. It does kind of lead me to my next talking point here. So I do want to talk about you being the director of sports medicine and performance with the Houston Astros. We've kind of touched on it a little bit here, but I really want to dive into what this role is, what it entails, what it looks like, how you manage your staff, all of that. So really my first thing is just you're overseeing an entire department with multiple disciplines. Is that correct?
Yeah, so my job with the Astros is I oversee the nutrition, medical, mental health and performance, and strength and conditioning departments. And so I do that for the major leagues and the entire minor league system. So AAA, AA, high A, low A, the Florida complex, and the Dominican complex. So I think we have something like 55 staff, something like that, full time. So yeah, it's again, I got to work with a very diverse group of people, multiple disciplines, and I love it. I mean, it keeps me very, very busy, but it's a ton of fun.
And then kind of going along those lines, like what are you doing to develop your staff, both in terms of like a unified education, but then also like individually meeting some of the goals? Because obviously, I'd imagine that everybody has kind of slightly different goals for themselves and their careers and things like that. And even if everybody has the same goal of like being in the big leagues, there's really only like 2 or 3 big league people per department. So like, how are you looking at that at a macro level and then more individually at a micro level?
Yeah, so we take a couple of different approaches to that. I mean, the big thing, like for my job, I guess, more and more, I definitely, like I was saying earlier, I'm not so much player facing anymore. Like my job really is to be, at least I think it is to really set a foundation of like what's the culture of the department, what's the vision of the department, what are our departmental objectives, how do those align with the organization as a whole, and really bring alignment and work with the other directors and management to make sure that we are kind of working in those ways. So anytime that I create a goal for a staff member, it is always related very much to our departmental objectives and the objectives of the entire organization. So I think that's something we have done, maybe I don't want to say uniquely well, but I think it's something that we have done well, and that there does seem to be alignment there. Um, so when I'm meeting with like my direct reports, often it's some of it's just through some personal development they can do, certainly with technical skills and their day-to-day administrative stuff, but often is more related to, hey, we have this departmental objective to get to here. Here's your current skill set. What's the gap for you to really contribute to us getting to this goal? And so it's often tied to those sorts of things. That's sort of the macro level. In terms of the more just kind of day-to-day, like classic professional development. So we do something that I call talent dialogues. It's a term that I stole from when I was with Cirque du Soleil. I always like that term better than like a performance evaluation. I do like to treat it more of a dialogue. So we'll do those 3 times a year. So we'll do one at spring training. We do kind of a mid-season check-in, and then we do one at the end of the season as well. And our spring training one is generally more of a goal setting. Talk about, hey, how did the off season go? What did you do for your development? What do you want to really try to hit on this year? We kind of map out the year. Then in the middle of the season, we meet again. We talk about like what's going well, what still needs to be improved on, where do we think there's some development opportunities. And then again, we kind of do that end of the season check-in, and we reevaluate and develop a plan for the off season. So, I think my background as like a sports scientist probably has bled into how I kind of manage people. And so I think I do try to treat it that way. It's almost like a training plan for an athlete, right? As you have really tangible goals, hopefully some objective data we can track, and we try to do those things. So we do those 3 times a year. We provide on a macro level, we do provide some like departmental professional development for within each unit. So we have some funds allotted to like shared professional development within strength conditioning, medical, mental health, and nutrition. And then each individual member of the team also has an allotment for professional development as well. And we help pay for like professional licenses and dues and stuff like that. But it's something that I value. I mean, like I was saying earlier, as long as they're good people, I think this is what this money is exactly for. It's like, let's teach you the technical skills, let's get you trained up, let's take courses, let's do all those things. Just make sure that you're fitting in with the culture and you're aligned with what we want to do. So that's generally our approach.
And then you mentioned like foundational objectives for your group and how they align with the organization. How much crossover do you have with the baseball side of things, the hitting, the pitching, the managerial side, and then also like into the front office? Like obviously it seems like you're kind of the top of the pyramid for the performance and the medical and all of that. How much do you overlap with baseball and then front office and then like kind of coming together collectively for an organization?
Yeah, I think that's one of the things that I've enjoyed or I've been most impressed with the Astros is, they treat me as a member of, classic kind of front office. Like my office is directly next to my boss, who is our assistant general manager, Andrew Ball, who's a tremendous guy. And then on the other side of me is our senior director of development, Jacob Buffa, who again is a tremendous guy. And so it's really easy for me to be very much integrated in what our management wants, what scouting wants, what player development wants. Jacob, as I mentioned, our director or senior director of player development, he and I are really just in lockstep on virtually everything. I mean, we really see things very similarly. I think our approaches to athlete development are very much aligned. He has a very strong background in strength conditioning and performance science as well. He actually runs our performance science department with the Astros, which is kind of unique. So there's just so much overlap in not only our philosophies and our vision for things, but just also too in like our day-to-day interactions. I mean, we spend a ton of time talking. So everything is very much, it's really connected. In many ways, I feel like SMMP is really just an arm of player development, and we kind of both kind of mutually view it that way. So we're very much aligned. Yeah.
And then in terms of specifics for your group, maybe just generally speaking, are you looking more for like player health objectives or performance goals? Like how does your group get evaluated within the big picture of the organization? Is it more like keeping people on the field or hitting performance metrics or somewhere in between or something completely different?
Yeah, I think it's a good question. The one that I struggle with most is injury rates. I know that's one people get kind of tossed around a little bit. And, I don't want to say that we don't view that as a measure of success because listen, if we're the worst ranked team 5 years in a row for injury rates, there's probably some signal there that we're not doing something right. Unfortunately, that has not been the case. So I definitely don't want to paint that picture. We're generally, I think, pretty good. But so injury rates is kind of a sticky one. There's just so many things, as you know, that influence injuries. That's kind of a dangerous road to go down. I don't think anyone perfectly understands that quite yet. So there's some work to be done there. But I think the things that I value more are our players hitting their goals. So we have a very formal player goal setting process that involves both player development. It involves SMMP heavily. Certainly it involves our management group and those sorts of people as well, front office members. And so basically for every player in our organization, we know, exactly what they need to be working on the field, off the field. And the way that I more evaluate my staff is, are the players achieving the goals that we set for them? And if the answer is no, then we need to take a critical look and say, well, why didn't we achieve the goal with, these players and why did we with these ones? And like, to me, it's always a moving target of, okay, let's create a new goal. Let's try to hit that and let's just keep going. So I think as long as we are hitting the goals that we set, I'm pretty happy. That's kind of how I evaluate the technical side of things. Quality of rehab is certainly one. So with like our rehab group, what's our re-injury rate? That is something that I do take probably a little bit more stock in turn rather than like an absolute injury rate. What does the performance look like when players return? Are they performing better than or worse when they get back? Or are they hitting all the metrics that you want them to hit? Are they better? Are they worse? Those things I look at. And the one that I personally value the most, as I've said countless times now, is I really evaluate them as people, and are they fitting well in the organization? Do they reflect the culture that we want? Are they creating a safe work environment? Is it a place where people want to come to work and enjoy working? I mean, without a doubt, that is the thing I value the most. To be honest, if somebody is not contributing to that environment, they're just not going to last very long. That's a pretty hard stop for me. The other stuff, like I said, we'll work on that, we'll develop it. But that is definitely something that we weigh as well as some of those technical aspects too.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense to me. And then you also mentioned that you're kind of overseeing major league and minor league. Are you visiting affiliates? Are you going back to Florida now that you're Houston based? Are you just allowing your coaches to kind of do their thing and checking in with them virtually? Like, what is your travel schedule per se?
Yeah, so I do affiliate visits. I actually just got back from Asheville, North Carolina, which is our high A affiliate. So I do try to get out to each affiliate, at least once a year, minimally. Obviously I spend a little bit more time in Sugar Land and Corpus, which is our AAA and AA, because I'm based in Houston and they're very close. I used to live in Florida. I was based there, so I know that facility really well. So I do travel a little bit with them. I do hop on the occasional major league road trip. But mostly I don't travel a ton, honestly. Like, I really have tried to not do that. I really trust, I have an excellent group of coordinators, for the minor leagues in each department. I really trust them to kind of do that work, and for me not to hover over them and step on their toes. So, I definitely have a lot of like virtual check-ins, a lot of phone calls, a lot of text messages. Like, I'm touching base with staff, I think pretty regularly. I probably would like to do a little bit more in person, but there's only so many hours in a day, and there's only so many budget, and so we're trying to get it all done. But a little bit of everything. But no, I'm not. I wouldn't say I'm real travel heavy at this point in my career. No.
Okay, and then I'm going to transition a little bit, but it's still going to be kind of related. Just what do you think makes a strength and conditioning coach successful, or a medical member successful? And then, as a young coach or a young practitioner, we'll say, like, how do you find success when you're first getting into the field? Let's say somebody listening wants to eventually be in your role someday. Like, what kind of advice do you have for them? How can they find success? Like, that type of stuff to like set them up for their future.
Yeah, I'll try to think of a few different things. I think one, I'll just speak from my own experience. I think, getting educated helps, I think. I think maybe people overvalue it a little bit. I have my PhD, so maybe that's hypocritical for me to say, but I don't think it's an absolute requirement that you have to have that. I think it gets you a foot in the door. So I think it does sort of seem now like a master's degree is sort of like a bachelor's degree. Like, it seems like everything's kind of gone up a level. So I think, one, invest in your education. Two, I don't think you need to kill yourself trying to get every certification under the sun. I definitely played that game in my 20s, where like any certification that came up, I try to get. And, at the end of the day, I pretty much let them all lapse. And I just, I don't think it's as necessary as maybe people think it is. The things that I think matter most are get out and get experiences, network. I think the thing, honestly, is just be willing to like volunteer your time, cold call people. You'd be amazed at how generous people are. I've had so many people who have helped me along the way. I don't even want to name any, because I'll just I'll just neglect so many others who have been so amazing. But, just be willing to invest that sort of time. And like, you might lose a bit of money taking a trip out to, Vegas to go to the UFC Performance Institute, whatever. But I mean, that will pay you back in experience 1,000 times over. You're going to meet some of the best people in the industry. That's just one example. I mean, there's a million, but you'd be amazed at how generous people can be. So, don't be afraid to put yourself out there. Definitely volunteer, get some of those things on your resume that you're willing to do that kind of stuff. And every person you meet might be your future boss, or might know somebody who can put you in touch with them. I mean, I say this all the time, and I know it's cliche as hell, but I think it's just absolutely true. Probably more than any other industry, sport is about people and relationships. And I really, really deeply believe that. I think that has impacted how I manage people and the work that I do. But it's also the advice that I would give you is, take the time to get to know people, invest in getting to know people, put yourself out there. And that is, to me, the single best thing you could possibly do. It's just network like crazy and be willing to invest in yourself and invest that time.
And then kind of along those lines, let's say you have a coach that's interviewing with you and they're really interested in the Houston Astros. Like, what do you look for in a potential hire? And then on the flip side, like what could a potential hire look for in the Houston Astros and the support that you're given?
Yeah, what do I look for? And so, I mean, it's very much role dependent, I guess. We have, kind of the more like entry level positions. I think I'm, uh, you know, I, just the criteria is different, right? Like I don't look necessarily for people with like strong people management skills because they're not going to be doing a ton of that. So we look probably a little bit more on the kind of basic technical side. Again, in the scope of like, are they a good person? Do we feel comfortable with them? And can they build relationships? But they don't need to be the greatest people managers in the world because that's not really a requirement of the job. I think part of what I've tried to do in my job is create succession plans for our coordinator positions, which do require people management skills. So, like if we're bringing in somebody external for like a coordinator level position, that is something that I will heavily weigh is do they have people management experience? And even if they don't, it's not a deal breaker, but do I think they've got the capability to do that? Do they have the right sort of feel to do that kind of work? And, so that's something we look at pretty heavily. But, in going back to those kind of more like entry level positions where that isn't a requirement, part of their professional development is those things. So we try to give them exposures to that, kind of microdose little opportunities to be a leader in a small group, like run an IST meeting or little things like that, that you can kind of, start to develop those skill sets as you go. So yeah, I think again, like what do I look for in terms of a staff? I think it's all the stuff I've talked about. It's like, are they a good cultural fit, kind of first and foremost? Do they have a skill set that aligns with our objectives within our department and within the organization? Do they have the kind of day-to-day technical skills to do the job? I mean, those are kind of the overarching themes, I guess. In terms of people who might be interested in the Astros, like what would we offer them? Listen, I think there's a lot of good organizations out there. I think not only in baseball, but in other sports. So I don't want to paint it like we're some unicorn that's uniquely special. But I will say this, I think the thing that I'm very proud of within the Astros, I'll speak specifically to my department, is the people that we have. I mean, we have an incredible group of people. Not only are they great at their jobs, they're just really good people. Like generally, I love the people that I work with. I'm very proud to work with them. I think if you come into the Houston Astros, you can feel very confident you're coming into an environment that is safe, it's welcoming, you're going to be encouraged, you're going to know exactly what's expected of you, you're going to have very clear objectives. Those objectives are going to be tracked. We're going to work on your development. And I think however long you stay with us, at the end of your tenure, you're going to be a better practitioner than when you got here. And I can say that pretty confidently. Like I said, I think the biggest thing is people. And I think we've done a really good job of that.
All of that makes a lot of sense. So if anybody is listening, they should be strongly encouraged. But let's shift gears a little bit. How about continuing education resources? Are there any books you'd recommend, seminars that you'd attend, podcasts you listen to, or even like places you talk about just kind of informally going to, like UFC, for instance, in Vegas? And you talked about the doctor up in Winnipeg. Like, where would you recommend to go for continuing education?
I think it's all the things that you just listed. I think, sometimes it's like formal conferences can be very useful. I think, the things that I use, so books are great. I tend to lean more now. I tend to read less about like really technical specific things. And I'm kind of now really into like organizational psychology and kind of more like business management stuff. And I guess that's largely because my job has kind of evolved into that. So I really like the organizational psychology space. I think there's a ton of good stuff there. One of the books that I most recently read was a book called Super Communicators by Charles Duhigg. I think it's Duhigg. Excellent book, really tremendous. So I tend to like stuff like that. So I'm kind of very interested in that area right now. Podcasts can be very useful. The traffic in Houston is terrible. Like today, it took me an hour and 20 minutes to get home. So, throw in a podcast and away you go. So that's a fun way to learn. I think those kind of hands-on, like practical experiences are amazing. Like I brought up the UFC Performance Institute earlier because when I was with the Canadian Olympic group, I had reached out, just cold called Dr. Duncan French and said, hey, would you be willing? And like so graciously, he's like, yeah, absolutely. Come on down. So I got to spend a few days with them. And I mean, everybody there was just so willing to give me their time and their energy. And they've been just great. Since then I've reached out to them multiple times and they've just been fantastic. And so Stuff like that, I think, is absolutely invaluable and probably better than any conference you're going to go to or any book you're going to read or any certification course you're going to take. Again, like all those things are valuable, but I really think it's like getting in there, seeing how other people do it. And everywhere you go, right, you get to kind of cherry pick the best stuff, and maybe you see something you don't like, you're like, you know what, that probably wouldn't work in my environment, but maybe some variation of that would. And again, like going back to my kind of diverse background, I think that's what's been the best part of it is I've literally got to work with all these very smart, wonderful people, and not everyone is perfect, of course, but everyone is good at something, right? And so you can pick the good stuff from each person. And, after 5, 10, 15 years into your career, you're going to have a whole lot of tools in your tool belt, and it's going to make you a much better practitioner. So I think it's everything you mentioned, try to do all of it. And like I said, just get out there and learn as much as you possibly can.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned that because I've been to certain places and I've seen certain things, and I always was looking at it through the context of professional baseball, right? Like, this might not work in my setting, but now that I'm in a different setting, I'm like, oh, actually, that could really work for me. And I learned it 5 years ago, kind of put it on the back burner, didn't really use it in baseball, but now that I'm out of it and I'm doing something different, I'm like, oh, I can actually use that. So it may be discredited just for your situation, but also they're probably doing it for a reason within their situation. So it's not like just throw it away, this person is stupid, it doesn't make any sense. It's more of like, does it fit my context? Yes or no? Clearly it fits their context. Maybe someday, like you said, you never know who's going to be your boss. Like maybe someday this will be my context and it will make sense to me. So all of that kind of rings true to me now that I'm starting to see things outside of just professional baseball. And for you, it's probably second nature because you've seen so many things over your career.
Yeah, no, I think that's true. I mean, it's funny coming into baseball, I often get asked like, is it really tough to go from hockey to baseball or from circ to hockey? I get asked that pretty well everywhere I go. And I think at the end of the day, what you learn is like people are people and humans are humans and physiology is physiology. And like what really matters is, repetition based learning and time on task and, fundamentals. I mean, like all the fancy stuff, I think, going back to your question earlier about like what's something that I think people might think I'm crazy for thinking. I think we collectively, in rehab, strength conditioning, sports science, medicine, all those different things. I think we probably have gotten to a point where we spend just way too much time worrying about like the next sexy piece of information or innovation and the next gadget and just massive overspending on all these tools instead of just literally focusing on like logical progression with some kind of foundational exercises and good movement skills. I think like more and more, I'm just convinced that that's what matters. I mean, one of the fascinating things at Cirque du Soleil was, I would see just the most insane things. Like, I'll give you an example of, there was this, a group, they were called Russian swing artists. And there was this group of female artists. And there was one group on a swinging platform. It's kind of hard to paint the picture, but think of it just a giant swing, essentially. They were on this flat platform that was connected by 2 cables to like a pendulum. And their momentum would cause it to swing back and forth, of course. And then like, I don't know, 20 yards away was another group on the exact same type of platform. And they would also be swinging. And the groups, the person at the front of the line on each of these things would be launched across that open space, doing a bunch of amazing tricks. And they would land on the moving platform across like 20 yards away. And it was just the most mind-boggling thing. I did a terrible job of explaining that, but hopefully you could visualize it. And you can look up Russian swing if you're curious. But and I just remember like, how in the hell are these people doing this skill? And then, you take a step back and you watch them in practice working on the skills on the ground. And then you see them working with it, a harness. And then you see them, practicing without the other swing moving. And like, it's just very logical and it's very simple building blocks. And you focus on the fundamentals and you develop each skill. And then by the end of the day, you've got this amazing thing. And there's just no shortcuts with doing that stuff. And I think we're, not to say we're looking for shortcuts, but I think sometimes we just overemphasize all that other stuff instead of really focusing on those fundamentals. So that's, just to go back to your earlier question, I think that's something I'm pretty convinced of. I think we've gone a little bit too far the other way with it.
Well, if you're crazy for thinking it, then I am too. So, but maybe we'll leave that for another episode.
Yeah.
I want to get you out of here. I know you got dad duty at some point, I'm sure, but I got a lightning round for you, 4 questions, as long or as short of answers as you want. And then I promise I'll let you go.
Sure, yeah, no, my pleasure.
Cool. First one, who is your biggest influence in the field of strength and conditioning, or I guess in general, just, in your career since you've done so many different things?
That's easy. Dr. Dean Krelarch, the guy I mentioned earlier. He's the spell. Just so if anyone is actually interested, his last name is Kreellaars. It's a bit of a alphabet soup there, but just an absolute brilliant guy. So he's by far been the biggest influence for me. That's easy.
One piece of equipment to train with, what would you choose?
Oh, that's a good one. Just give me some open space. Honestly, I don't need a whole lot. Give me some open space and some cones, and we could probably do some pretty cool movement stuff. Beyond that, I don't know. Nothing wrong with some traditional like a rack and a barbell. Don't need a lot.
Biggest accomplishment professionally and or personally?
Well, the greatest thing of my life is the birth of my son. That's really easy. Professionally, I know it's supposed to be a lightning round, but winning the World Series was obviously incredible. Anytime any of the athletes I worked with won like Olympic medals or world champion, like those are obviously incredible. But like I said, it's more like kind of the personal development pieces that I actually kind of enjoy it better.
Any career other than strength and conditioning, what would you choose?
You know what? I probably would go back to doing like psychiatry. I like that side of things, so I have a pretty deep interest in that. I'd probably go that route.
Adam, I appreciate your time and getting to know you. If the listeners want to get in touch with you, where can we get more? Are you on social media, or is there a better place?
Yeah, I'm on LinkedIn. If anyone wants to connect there, I try to be decent. Not that I don't post a whole lot, but I'm pretty active. I check it almost every day, so you can reach me there. You can email me with the Astros if you want. Reach out that way. Yeah, I'm happy to take any calls or emails. I'd love to connect with people. So anytime.
Cool. Appreciate your time. We'll definitely catch up soon, and good luck the rest of the way.
Yeah, it was a pleasure. Thanks so much.
All right, everybody, that's going to conclude part 2 of this 2-part interview with Adam. I hope you enjoyed both parts of the interview. It was really cool to hear his story, to hear about all the stops along the way that ultimately brought him to professional baseball and to the Houston Astros organization. And then it was also cool to have a discussion with somebody who oversees multiple departments and kind of has to take that 30,000-foot view of management, right? All the things that go into hiring and developing and maintaining happiness amongst the staff, and then keeping everybody in line with objectives both in their department and then organizationally as well. It was really cool to just kind of hear how he has to shuffle things around and what his day-to-day looks like. 3 things that I took from Adam in this episode: treating performance evaluations as more of talent dialogues will allow for clearer communication and easier clarity on shared goals and learning objectives. Don't be afraid to volunteer your time and put yourself out there, because every person you might meet along the way may be your future boss. And focusing on the fundamentals will take you farther than you may actually think. With that being said, I hope you enjoyed this episode, and we'll talk to you again on the next one.